don't want 80s batteries to die on us. So, yes, in the 1880s, this was a very popular place to be. It still is these days, but more so in the 1880s. And that was due in a large part to the guy that used to run this place, a chap by the name of Herbert Hollins. And Herbert was something of a local legend around these parts. He was a very well-liked publican. He ran a very popular establishment. Lots of people knew him, lots of people liked him. And he seemed on the surface to be a very outgoing, jolly, gregarious kind of a character. Ideal material for a landlord. If trouble broke out, he was on hand to deal with it. He was fine, he wasn't a pushover, but he was a very nice chap and everybody seemed to like him. And they certainly seemed to like this place, the place he ran. What nobody knew, however, was far from being the jolly old soul that everybody took him to be at face value, he was in fact a very depressed individual. Nobody's quite sure what the cause of his depression is. He was known to be something of a gambler. He was a big drinker. However, on the flip side, he wasn't married, he had no kids, so you could argue that's the reason to be depressed. But whatever the reason, this cloud of depression, it hung over him for many a long year, and it came to a head one night in November of 1888. The innkeeper locks up the pub as he did every night, but rather than taking himself off to bed, on this particular occasion, he took himself off into the back of the building, the kitchens, and he found himself the longest, sharpest butcher's knife he could lay his hands on. He picked up an old oil lamp and he headed off alone down into the gloom of the cellar beneath your feet where we now stood. And down there, he set down the oil lamp, he took the blade in his right hand, and perhaps with just a moment's hesitation, a flicker of doubt, he proceeded to drag the blade from ear to ear. Huge wound opens up, copious amounts of blood come flooding out, and the innkeeper falls into a bloody heap on the cellar floor. And there, Herbert Hollins died in his own cellar beneath his own pub. Now, as I've mentioned a few times on this tour already, death is merely the beginning of the story, and it all really takes off from this point. The next day, obviously, the pub remains closed, and after a few hours, people start asking questions. Why is the pub not open? Where's Herbert? What's going on? They managed to locate somebody who had a spare key. They opened up, and it was they who discovered what must have been the horrific sight in the cellar, the very bloody sight of Herbert Hollins dead in the cellar. And when news gets out, a lot of people are very upset and very distressed to hear what's happened, because, as I say, he was a popular man, a well-known man. And so they decided, the regulars, the locals here, that they were going to raise some funds, they were going to put some money together, and they were going to give him a good send-off, the sort of funeral that they felt that he deserved. There was no family to do it for him, so the regulars, they took it upon themselves. And as it turned out, they raised quite a considerable sum of money. So much so that the day of Herbert Hollins' funeral is said to have been quite an event here in Chester. People lined the streets all the way up Park Street here. They had his coffin on a horse-drawn cart, and people came out and they cheered and they waved him off as he went off to the church, and they went off to the funeral and they buried him. It was really quite an event, quite a big occasion. Eventually, they went through the service. That was that, and seemingly the end of the story. However, there have been many sightings of the ghost of Herbert Hollins in this part of Chester ever since. Most of them, as you would imagine, down there in the cellar, the actual site where he died, but also in the pub, and also out here on the street. Lots of people have reported seeing things, lots of people have reported strange sounds, screaming, groaning sounds, possibly the sounds, the final sounds that Herbert Hollins made as he died. So, what I normally say at this point is, when you find yourselves down here in Park Street late one night, and you think you hear something, perhaps you think you see something just out of the corner of your eye, I would say to you, don't be too alarmed. I don't think you guys would be alarmed, to be perfectly honest. I think you'd be just fine. But if you were down here and you saw, as I say, a fleeting image of what might have been Herbert Hollins, then I would suggest you not to be too alarmed, because it might just be that friendly, jovial old innkeeper that I described to you. Return to Park Street, return to the Albion, his old patch. One final drink. Thank you very much, gents. You've been absolutely splendid company. Oh, round of applause. Right on cue.
We've got no beer, but we've got lots of speech.
He likes to do his joke. Okay,
Cheers.
thanks, H.
All right, buddy.
Thanks, audience. Cheers.
All right, mate. Thanks.
Okay, go on, get back in your cellar. Okay, now again.